My son-in-law didn't come to the hospital when my daughter collapsed. 3 hours later, I saw him tagged in a photo at a casino bar in Atlantic City, arms around a woman I had never seen before, grinning like a man on vacation. And then my daughter's phone, the one the nurses had given me to hold, lit up with a text from him. "Dad, don't let them operate. I need to talk to you first." But my daughter was already in surgery. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever had to stand up for someone you love when your legs were shaking so hard you could barely stand, hit that like button. You will understand why in a minute. My name is Howard Beckett. I am 68 years old, and I spent 31 years as a forensic accountant for the federal government. I know how to read a ledger. I know how numbers lie when people want them to. I know that the cleanest-looking columns are often the ones hiding the deepest fraud. But standing in that hospital hallway in Cincinnati, holding my daughter's phone in one hand and a paper cup of cold coffee in the other, I realized that all those years of reading documents had not prepared me for this. Some things cannot be audited. Some losses cannot be itemized. My daughter's name is Nadia. She is 34 years old, and she has her mother's eyes, dark brown with these little flecks of gold that you only notice when the light hits just right. Her mother, my wife Elaine, passed from ovarian cancer 6 years ago, and after that it was just the two of us. Nadia and I ate dinner together every Sunday. She called me every Tuesday night, always around 8, always to talk about nothing important, about a podcast she had listened to or a plant she was trying not to kill. Those calls were the architecture of my week. Everything else was just filler between them. She married Colton Reeve 2 years ago. I want to be fair here. I want to say what I actually felt and not dress it up. I never liked Colton, not because he was unkind to her in ways I could point to, not because he raised his voice or embarrassed her in public. It was something quieter than that. It was the way he would look past her when she was telling a story, like he was already waiting for her to finish. It was the way he talked about her career, a graphic designer she had built from nothing, as if it were a hobby she would eventually outgrow. It was the way he handled their money, which I only found out about later. When I told Elaine back when Nadia first brought him home that something felt off, Elaine said I needed to let my daughter live her life. She was right, of course. So I smiled at the wedding. I gave the toast. I said all the right things. And then I watched and waited, the way you do when you know a structure has a flaw but you cannot prove it yet. The call came on a Wednesday morning in March, the hospital number on my screen. Not Nadia's name, not Colton's, the hospital. I knew before I answered. She had collapsed at her studio. One of her freelance clients, a young woman who had come in for a branding meeting, found her on the floor and called 911. Nadia had been complaining of fatigue for weeks. She had told me she thought it was a vitamin deficiency. She had told Colton she thought it was stress. She had told the doctor, when she finally went, that she was probably just overworking herself. None of them were right. I drove to Cincinnati General in 34 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock when I left and looked at it again when I pulled into the parking garage. I don't remember the drive itself. I remember the parking garage. I remember the smell of it, oil and concrete and exhaust, and the way the fluorescent lights flickered above me as I ran toward the elevator. The nurse at the ICU desk told me Nadia was stable, but they were running tests. They thought it might be her kidneys. They were not sure yet. She handed me Nadia's personal effects in a clear plastic bag. Her phone was in it. I held it and stood there in the hallway trying to figure out who to call. I called Colton first, of course I did, straight to voicemail. I texted him, then I called again, voicemail again. I found a chair near the window and sat down. The chair was made of that hard molded plastic they use in hospitals and airports, the kind that is designed to be cleanable rather than comfortable. An hour passed. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram, because Nadia had linked her account to mine once, so I could see pictures of the garden she was trying to grow on their apartment balcony. I almost ignored it. Then I looked. A friend had tagged Colton in a photo. He was at the Gilded Wheel, a casino bar in Atlantic City, which is 4 hours from Cincinnati. He was in a white dress shirt, untucked. He was holding a drink, and there was a woman beside him, her head tilted toward his shoulder, and he was smiling the way I had never seen him smile at my daughter. The timestamp said the photo had been posted 40 minutes ago. I put the phone face down on my knee. I breathed slowly, the way the VA therapist had taught me after Elaine died. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. I breathed until the red film at the edges of my vision cleared. Then I picked up the phone and took a screenshot. The accountant in me never destroys data. Then Nadia's phone lit up in my other hand, a text coming into her number from Colton. "Dad, don't let them operate. I need to talk to you first." I stared at the message for a long time. He was texting her. He did not know I had her phone. He was texting a woman in an ICU bed, unconscious, asking her to stop a medical procedure. And he was calling himself Dad, which was what Nadia called him sometimes as a joke, a habit from early in their relationship that had never quite gone away. Don't let them operate. I thought about what a man would need to stop. I thought about insurance. I thought about medical power of attorney, which Nadia had given to Colton when they married, because that is what people do when they marry. They trust each other with the paperwork of their lives. If the hospital could not reach the person holding medical power of attorney, procedures could be delayed. In some cases, significantly delayed. I stood up. I walked to the nurse's station. I told them I was Nadia's father, her emergency contact, and that I had been unable to reach her husband. I asked where we stood. The nurse checked her screen. She said they were recommending a biopsy, that the attending wanted to move quickly because certain markers in Nadia's blood panel were concerning. She said they needed consent from the person holding medical power of attorney. I asked how long they could wait. She said ideally not more than a few hours. I walked back to my chair. I sat down. I looked at Colton's text again. "Don't let them operate. I need to talk to you first." There was a sound in the hallway behind me. A family coming through, a grandmother in a wheelchair and children trailing behind her like ducklings. Normal life, happening right next to the worst moments of other people's lives, the way it always does in hospitals. I watched them pass. I thought about Elaine. I thought about the last time I sat in a hospital hallway waiting for news about someone I loved. I thought about how Nadia had sat beside me then, her hand on my arm, not saying anything, just there. I picked up my own phone and called my attorney. "His name is Fenwick Hale. We have known each other for 30 years, he answered on the second ring. I told him everything. The collapse, the casino photo, the text about the surgery. I told him about the medical power of attorney. He was quiet for a moment, the specific quiet of a man doing calculations. Then he said, "Howard, does she have a living will?" I said I did not know. He said, "Find out. And Howard, call your daughter's doctor directly. As her father enlisted emergency contact, you have standing to provide consent if her spouse cannot be reached in a timely manner, and the delay poses a risk to the patient. Document every attempt you make to contact him. Timestamp everything." I thanked him. I hung up. I looked at the time. 2 hours had passed since I arrived. I called Colton 11 more times over the next 40 minutes. I have the call log. Every call went to voicemail. I left messages on 4 of them. Calm messages, factual messages, telling him where I was and what the doctors needed. I texted him 3 times. I even tried the number of the one friend of his I had saved in my own phone, a man named Declan, who had been at the wedding. Declan did not answer either. At the 90-minute mark, the attending physician came out to speak with me. He was a young man, younger than Nadia, with exhausted eyes and a calm voice. He explained what they had found. He used words I had to ask him to repeat. He was gentle about it. He said they believed the kidney function issue was connected to something else, something in her blood work that they needed the biopsy to confirm, and that time was a factor. I showed him the call log, 11 attempts, 0 responses. He went to get the hospital's patient advocate. 20 minutes later, with Fenwick on the phone providing legal backup, I signed the consent as Nadia's next of kin, given documented failure to reach the holder of medical power of attorney. The biopsy proceeded. I sat back down in the hard plastic chair. I was shaking, not from fear, though there was plenty of that. I was shaking from the effort of holding it all in. The rage, the grief, the thing I had felt in my gut about Colton Reeve since the first time I shook his hand and looked into his eyes and saw nothing behind them that I recognized as honest. My phone buzzed. A text from Colton, finally. 6 words. Tell her to wait for me. I put the phone in my coat pocket. I did not respond. The biopsy took 3 hours. I drank 4 cups of bad coffee. I walked the length of the hallway 17 times, counting my steps, which is something I do when I am trying to keep my mind from running ahead of me into the dark. I called Fenwick twice more. He had already begun looking into things, he said. He would call me back. The doctor came out at 7:42 in the evening. Nadia was awake. The biopsy had found what he suspected. He said a name I will not reproduce here because this is about more than a diagnosis. What matters is that it was treatable. What matters is that if we had waited, it would have been significantly more difficult to treat. What matters is that the intervention they were able to begin that night, because we did not wait, changed the trajectory of everything that came after. She was going to be okay. I sat down in the hallway floor, not in a chair, on the floor, my back against the wall, because my legs simply stopped. A nurse asked if I was all right. I told her I just needed a minute. She brought me a cup of water and did not make a fuss, which was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in years. Colton walked in at 8:15. He was still in the white dress shirt. He smelled of airport and something sweet, the kind of sweet that comes from certain cocktails. He saw me on the floor and his face went through several expressions in about 2 seconds, surprise, calculation, and then the thing he settled on, which was concern, performed concern. The kind you put on like a jacket when you walk into a room. Howard, he said. Where is she? Is she okay? I came as fast as I could. My phone died. I looked up at him. I have spent 31 years detecting fraud. I know what a lie sounds like. It sounds exactly like that. I stood up slowly. She's awake, I said. They did the biopsy without you. Something moved behind his eyes without me. Howard, I have power of attorney. They can't. They can when the holder can't be reached, I said. I documented every attempt. He stared at me. That expression again, the flicker of calculation. I need to see her, he said. She's resting, I said. And before you go in there, I need you to look at something. I took out my phone. I showed him the Instagram photo, the casino bar, the white shirt he was currently wearing, the woman beside him. I watched his face. He looked at the photo and then he looked at me. And for a moment the performance dropped entirely, and what I saw underneath it was not remorse. It was arithmetic. He was calculating what I knew and what I could prove and what it would cost him. That was a work event, he said. A client dinner. Howard, I know how this looks. Colton, I said. And I kept my voice quiet because we were in a hospital hallway and Nadia was 30 feet away. I have been a forensic accountant for 31 years. I know what evidence looks like. I know what the absence of evidence looks like. I know that your phone did not die because you received 3 texts from my daughter's number after 8 o'clock tonight, and every one was delivered, not failed. I know that Atlantic City is 4 hours from Cincinnati, and I know that you texted my unconscious daughter to tell her not to let the doctors operate. The hallway was very quiet. The overhead lights hummed. I want you to go home tonight, I said. I will stay with Nadia. In the morning, she and I are going to have a conversation, and then you and I are going to have a different one. He left. He did not argue. He did not push past me to see her. He turned and walked back down the hallway and through the double doors, and I watched him go, and then I went in to sit with my daughter. She was smaller looking in the hospital bed. That is always the way. People you love look smaller when they are sick, as if the illness takes up space that used to belong to them. But her eyes were open, and they had those little flecks of gold, and when she saw me, she tried to smile. "Hey, Dad," she said. Her voice was thin, but it was hers. "Hey," I said. I sat in the chair beside her bed and took her hand. It was cold. I held it in both of mine. We didn't talk about Colton that night. I didn't have the heart. I just sat there, and we watched a nature documentary on the small television mounted to the wall, one of those programs about tide pools, and she fell asleep during it, and I stayed until the nurse made me go home at midnight. And I drove back to my house in the dark and sat at my kitchen table until 3 in the morning. I called Fenwick again the next day. I told him what I had not told him before, the things I had noticed over the past 2 years that I had filed away and tried to ignore. The way Nadia's joint checking account had been drained down 3 times in the past year, always with explanations that sounded reasonable in isolation. The way she had mentioned once that Colton had suggested she put the graphic design business under his name for tax purposes, which she had thankfully declined. The way her own credit score had dropped 18 points, which she had mentioned in passing, confused because she had not opened any new accounts. Fenwick was quiet again. Then he said, "Howard, I want you to pull her credit report, all 3 bureaus, and I want you to look at the authorized user accounts." I drove to the hospital. I sat beside Nadia's bed and I told her quietly and carefully what I had seen in the casino photo and what I had found in the call log. I did not dramatize it. I did not perform. I just laid out the facts the way I would lay out a balance sheet. She was quiet for a long time. The tide pool documentary was still on, muted now, colorful fish moving silently across the screen. Then she said, "How long have you known?" "I didn't know," I said. "I suspected." "There's a difference." She looked at the ceiling. "I thought I was being paranoid," she said. "I thought it was stress. I thought I was imagining things." She paused. "The fatigue. The doctors think it's been going on for months. They think my kidneys have been under stress for months." I did not say what I was thinking. I waited. "He makes my coffee," she said very quietly. "Every morning. He makes it before I wake up. He says it's his way of taking care of me." I went home that afternoon and I sat at my kitchen table and I pulled out a legal pad and a pen, because some things you have to write down by hand to make them real. I wrote down everything I knew: the drained accounts, the credit score drop, the medical power of attorney that had gone unused when she needed it most, the casino bar, the woman, the text that said, "Don't let them operate," the months of fatigue that her doctors said had been damaging her kidneys slowly. I wrote it all down. And then I picked up the phone and called a detective I had worked with during my last years at the agency. Her name is Phyllis, and she is the most careful person I have ever met, which is a quality I prize above almost everything else. I told her I needed help documenting a pattern. She said she could be at my house in 2 hours. Fenwick called while Phyllis was with me. The credit report had come back. Colton had added himself as primary account holder on 2 credit cards in Nadia's name 18 months ago, using documents she had signed as part of what he had told her was a routine financial consolidation. The outstanding balance on those 2 cards was $41,000. Nadia did not know the cards existed. Phyllis looked at the number I had written on the legal pad. She looked at me. She did not say anything for a moment. "Howard," she said, "what do you want the outcome to be?" I told her I wanted 2 things. I wanted Nadia safe, and I wanted a complete picture of what had been done to her, documented, provable, sufficient to stand up to scrutiny. She nodded. She picked up her coffee cup. "Then let's build the file," she said. What came out over the following 3 weeks was not what I had expected, which is perhaps the most honest thing I can say about it. I had expected to find the casino woman and discover it was a simple affair. What Phyllis found was more methodical than that. Colton had been running what amounted to a long game. He had selected Nadia, Phyllis believed, because she had no siblings, because her mother was gone, because she had a business with clean revenue and a father who lived 2 hours away, and who Colton had correctly assessed as a man who would not intervene without evidence. He had been bleeding her finances slowly, which was why the credit score had dropped, but nothing had triggered a fraud alert. He had added the credit cards, which she had never seen a statement for, because he managed the mail. He had, at some point over the past 6 months, begun adding something to her morning coffee. We did not have a lab analysis yet. The doctors had found elevated levels of a compound in her blood work that they were still characterizing. But the nephrologist, when Fenwick sent him a careful inquiry, said the pattern was consistent with chronic low-dose exposure to something her kidneys struggled to process. He had been making her sick, slowly, carefully, the way you do when you want a person to become dependent on you, too fatigued to run the business you want to absorb, too unwell to pay close attention to the bank statements you intercept. I held that knowledge for a full evening before I decided what to do with it. I sat in my kitchen with a glass of water because I had not been able to touch anything stronger since Elaine died, and I looked at the legal pad, and I thought about Nadia in her hospital bed saying she thought she was imagining things. She had not been imagining things. I called Fenwick. I called Phyllis. We met at Fenwick's office on a Saturday morning and we laid it all out. Fenwick said, "The fraudulent credit accounts are federal. The financial crimes unit will take seriously. But the physical component, the compound in her blood work, that needs the DA's office, and we need the lab results before we go to them." Phyllis said, "The lab results will come. I can expedite. But in the meantime, I want to make sure he doesn't have time to move money or destroy records. I want to serve him with a civil notice of claim before he knows the DA is involved." I said, "What do I do?" Fenwick looked at me the way he has been looking at me for 30 years, like a man who respects your intelligence enough to tell you the hard thing directly. "You talk to your daughter," he said. "Whatever we build, she has to be the one to decide to use it." He was right. I knew he was right. But it was the hardest thing on the list. I drove to the hospital on Sunday. Nadia was sitting up in bed. She was stronger. They had started the treatment and it was working, which the doctor had told me privately was a good indicator. She had color in her face again. She had ordered the hospital's version of chicken soup, which she said tasted like regret dissolved in warm water, and we had laughed about that, an actual laugh, the first one in 10 days. I told her everything. I did not leave anything out. I laid out the accounts, the credit cards, the medical power of attorney that had gone to a man who was in Atlantic City when she was in an ICU. I laid out what Phyllis had found about the pattern. I told her about the compound in her blood work and the nephrologist's observation and what it suggested. She did not cry. I want to say she was devastated, but devastated is not quite the word. She looked like someone doing a math problem they already knew the answer to. She looked like a person who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was being told that yes, the weight was real, they had not been imagining it. "The coffee," she said. "We don't have the lab results yet," I said. "But you think it was the coffee?" I did not answer that. Instead, I said, "What do you want to do?" She was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, the Cincinnati afternoon was gray and flat, the kind of sky that can't decide if it wants to be winter or spring. She watched it. "I want my business back," she said. "I want my name on my own accounts. I want to know what he took." She paused. "And I want to make sure he can't do it to anyone else." I nodded. "Fenwick and Phyllis are ready to move when you are," she looked at me. "Dad," she said, "why didn't you say anything before the wedding? I know you had a feeling." I thought about the right way to answer that. I thought about Elaine, who had been right to tell me to let Nadia live her life. I thought about how both of those things could be true at the same time. "Because you deserved the chance to find out for yourself," I said. "And because I didn't have proof. I had a feeling, which is not the same thing." She was quiet again. "You have proof now." "We do," I said. "Then let's use it." The civil notice was served on a Tuesday. The call from the Federal Financial Crimes Unit came on Thursday. The DA's office became involved the following Monday, after the lab results confirmed what the nephrologist had suspected. Phyllis had expedited the analysis through a contact at the state crime lab. The compound found in Nadia's blood work was consistent with long-term exposure to a diuretic compound, the kind that accelerates kidney stress when administered chronically in small amounts. Not immediately lethal, not dramatic. The kind of thing that over time makes a person dependent, depleted, and unable to run a business, manage her own finances, or notice that her credit cards are being used in her name without her knowledge. Colton Reeve was arrested on a Wednesday morning. He was not at the apartment he shared with Nadia. He was at a hotel in Columbus, 45 miles away. Phyllis had tracked his car there the night before. He did not resist. He did not shout. He looked, according to Phyllis who was there, like a man who had known this was coming and had simply been waiting for it to arrive. That particular look, she told me later, was almost more disturbing than rage would have been. I heard this secondhand. I was at the hospital with Nadia when it happened. She had been discharged the previous week but had a follow-up appointment, and I drove her because she's still tired easily. We were sitting in the waiting room when Phyllis called me. I stepped into the hallway. When I came back in and sat down beside her, Nadia looked at my face and knew. She took a breath, slow and deliberate. She looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Okay," she said, "just that word." Then she picked up a magazine from the side table, one of those home design magazines full of kitchens that no real person owns, and she started flipping through it. Her hands were steady. I have thought about that moment many times since, the ordinary courage of it, the specific kind of steadiness that comes not from the absence of pain, but from having decided that the pain does not get to run the whole show. In the months that followed, Nadia rebuilt. It was not fast and it was not clean, and there were Tuesday nights when she called me at 8 and cried for most of it, and I just listened because that was what she needed. The credit card debt was discharged through the fraud proceedings. Her business, which had kept running on the momentum she had built before the depletion began, came back to her fully. She hired an accountant. She changed every account, every password, every automatic payment. She was methodical about it. She has her mother's eyes and her mother's stubbornness, which I have always considered the same quality viewed from two different angles. Colton pled guilty to financial fraud and a reduced charge related to the compound, which his attorney argued could not be proven as intentional harm beyond reasonable doubt. I disagreed with the plea arrangement. Fenwick told me that Nadia had been part of that decision, that she had chosen certainty over the ordeal of a trial, and that it was her call to make. I accepted that. I did not have to like it. I planted a garden this spring. I have never gardened before. Nadia told me once that it was meditative, that you could not think about other things when you were putting seeds in the ground, because the ground demanded your full attention. I decided to try it. I built 3 raised beds along the south side of my yard using cedar planks and corner posts and a bag of screws. I measured twice before I cut anything, which is a habit I will never break. The beds are level. The soil is good. I planted tomatoes and peppers and 1 bed of flowers that Nadia picked out from a catalog she mailed me. Actual mail, a catalog with a yellow sunflower on the cover. On the first real warm Sunday of the year, she drove up from Cincinnati. She brought coffee, which she now makes herself every morning in the French press I gave her for her birthday. We sat in the lawn chairs I keep by the garden, and we drank it and watched the early things come up. The little green shoots that look impossibly fragile and are not. She told me about a new client, a woman who was starting a bakery and needed a full brand package, logo and packaging and the whole thing. She was excited about it. She talked about the color palette she was considering, warm ochres and deep greens, and I listened and did not understand most of it but watched her face, which was animated and unguarded in a way I had not seen in too long. Then she was quiet for a little while, looking at the garden. "I keep thinking," she said, "about what he was counting on, that I wouldn't notice, that you wouldn't push, that everyone would just believe him because he sounded reasonable." She paused. "He was counting on us being polite." I thought about that. I thought about all the moments I had swallowed the feeling in my gut because I didn't have proof, because Elaine had told me to let her live her life. Because a father who interferes is a father who drives his child away. All the correct and reasonable and well-intentioned reasons to stay quiet. "He was wrong about that," I said. She looked at me sideways. "Eventually," she said, and she smiled. "The real one, the one that has the gold flecks in it." I smiled back. The coffee was good. The green things in the beds were growing. The morning was the particular kind of quiet that feels earned, and we sat in it for a long time without needing to fill it with anything at all.